Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is part 2 of our coverage of the 2025 Toronto International Film Festival. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week on the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you, or occasionally, as we said, going to festivals and seeing as many films as we can. We already had in the feeds our part 1 where we covered the first 7 films that we saw together, and now we're going to cover the next however many we can fit into this episode before we have to run off to another set of screenings. Yeah, how you feeling, Stephen?
Whew, I'm not gonna lie. We're on day number 5, and it's a rough one for me. I had the dreaded case of insomnia that hits me usually at least once or twice every time I do one of these festivals. Just your brain is taking too much input, your sleep schedule is all over the place, and eventually wires get crossed. So
Yeah.
It's gonna be a tough one, but hey, that's what we're here for. We're here to suffer, and we're here to watch a fuck ton of movies.
Yeah, for me, luckily, it's usually the first 2 nights or the night I arrive that I have that insomnia. It's hard to fall asleep, hard to get on the other schedule. So because I had the extra few days here, at least sleep-wise, into a normal cadence where like I crash out, I wake up when my alarm goes off, I'm good to go. It's really just the staying awake during the films that...
Yeah, I will admit, part of my insomnia took the shape of thinking about how you were sleeping right now and feeling very jealous.
Nice.
I kept thinking, like, he's going to be tired tomorrow morning. And he's sleeping right now.
Oh, well.
And then I kicked you on your side of the bed and made you stop snoring.
All right. Ready to get started, Stephen?
Yep, let's do it.
All right. Well, let's start with the first film that we didn't get to fit in the last episode, and that is The Smashing Machine. So this is probably one of the big known quantities coming into the festival. It's the latest film from Benny Safdie, and it stars The Rock and Emily Blunt, and is basically the story of a real-life UFC fighter who, went through some stuff. This film... you kind of expect, without knowing the backstory for it, you kind of expect this is going to be like either a rise and fall or a triumphant rise sort of film about a person coming up in this industry. But it's really sort of like a small window of time looking at this person, what happened to him in like a range of 3 years, specifically around a series of fights and around an event that happened in his life. So it's a wildly different story than I was expecting. There's not a lot story in this film, but it is a really interesting character study. And, DJ, as everybody calls him.
Yeah, we're calling him DJ now. Yeah. I learned that in the Q&A.
DJ is phenomenal in this film. I think that this is a really interesting film that's just a picture of a really violent industry and the actual nice guys that are in it, and kind of these people who are just genuine people who want to do good at their sport. And everybody thinks about UFC as just this super violent thing with like weird fans. But it's actually a bunch of people who have a good camaraderie together and enjoy doing what they do, even if that is smashing each other's faces in. And I really enjoyed just this film for what it was. It was not what I was expecting. But for me, just seeing this thing play out and watching DJ perform in the film, I think was worth the price of admission for it. But what did you think of it?
Yeah, so this is a strange film for me because it's the only time I can recall that watching a premiere, like seeing the Q&A and the introduction, might have actively detracted from my enjoyment of the film. And that's because the movie that I think in a vacuum I was watching is pretty fucking awesome and daring. And that movie seems very much like it is examining this superficial happiness, this weird thing that happens to people when they're so driven by success and their star persona that they like kind of forget who they are inside and just become this like uncanny grin, which is something that both Mark Kerr and Dwayne Johnson have in spades. So anyway, I was watching this movie, but when the movie started, it was immediately a celebration, right? Like Benny Safdie came on stage. He brought on the real life Mark Kerr, the whole cast and crew. Many of the cast, are themselves MMA fighters of some sort. The real life Dawn was in the audience. The real life Mark Coleman was in the audience. And there was a feeling of this is celebratory. We are, championing a legacy. We are honoring such a wonderful person. And the movie made so much more sense to me as like a darkly funny deconstruction of a sort of mania that is more in line with like Uncut Gems or other Safdie brothers movies. And it is like, I think Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in that mode, in my interpretation, is giving a fucking amazing and daring performance, because he's really like shattering his own self-image and talking about how it feels to like always be on, right?
Yeah.
Mark Kerr can never lose a match. He can't even intellectually think about losing. Dwayne Johnson can't be seen losing anything in any of his movies, right? He has to like count punch for punch and make sure that he's winning all the time.
Yeah.
And so anyway, on the one hand, there's this really, really interesting character study that I thought was funny and awkward and uncanny, an exploration of a relationship that seemed very toxic but relatable, you know? And then on the other, there's like, A, the way they talked about the film, which sounded very straightforwardly praising of all of these people, and B, the actual movie that it's in, which has all the trappings of more of like a traditional biopic of we are watching the rise and fall and rise again, and we are ending in triumph. And it is such a strange, uncanny thing, because I think there's a fucking amazing movie inside of this very normal movie, and I don't know like how to square it. I don't know if the comedy that I was picking up on is just me being an asshole or bringing my own baggage to the screen, or if that is there, and then Benny Safdie just felt maybe too friendly or respectful of the people who collaborated with him to underline any of that stuff, so he sanded down the edges a bit. It is, I think this is a very good movie. I just am very, very puzzled over it, because there's something really, really damning hiding inside of it, and it feels like afraid to say that it's damning or tell you that it's damning. And I don't know. I've been wrestling with it, or kickboxing, or whatever other sport you want, for a few days now, and I still have no idea how to categorize this.
Yeah, so I don't think it's sanded off the edges, and I don't think it's a pure celebration. I just think it is a dissection of these guys are different than you think they are, if you just had to assume what their lives were. And I think when I realized that this was going to be a really short window in his life and not be like a true biopic, it was just going to be like I think it starts with title cards that are like, this took place between like 2019 and 2021 or something like that. I forget exactly what the date range was, but it's like, this is just like a finite window of time, and this is all the junk that happened. And it's not really, I mean, there are major life events that take place during it, but it's not really bookended by a thing that sets a goal and an end point. It's just like kind of a couple of seasons of stuff that takes place, and it's really just meant to show what the character went through and versus the personality that he has, you know. So right. I don't know. I just watching the Rock be vulnerable in that way was just really impressive. So
I guess my only gap is one thing that they seem to be praising and honoring, even in real footage that's put into this movie, is the smile, the charisma, the genuine joy of Mark Kerr. And it seems very genuine, right? Like, seeing him now, it seems that way. The way Dwayne Johnson plays it, I don't believe it is genuine. I believe it is a cry for help and a mask that he is wearing. And to me, unpacking both of those things is kind of the thing I don't totally get. It makes it super fucking interesting to watch, though. Anyway, moving on to another star-studded movie about a smashing machine. We got to talk about Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. I don't think people need a lot of context to know what the story of Frankenstein is. All I'll say is this one seems to hew much more closely to the original source material by Mary Shelley, which, depending on your appetite for kind of gothic, fantastical storytelling, might be a really poor decision on Guillermo's part. I'll tell you, I went in hoping this movie would be great, and I was not very into much of any of it. Basically, like, the story it decides to tell is one that for a while is just centering around Dr. Frankenstein, right? His childhood, him, first getting into the sciences, his decision to finally build Frankenstein. And then there's a moment, I don't think this is going to be too spoilery because it is in the book, like, this is hewing very, very closely to the original Frankenstein. There's a moment that I would call, like, Rashomon's Frankenstein monster. You get my drift. There's a moment where perspective asks us to see Frankenstein's monster in the light of day, listen to him talk, wax poetic about philosophy, things for a very, very long time. And there is just no tension in that at all. Like, for me, it was completely devoid of any kind of narrative momentum. I felt like I was just watching a lovingly recreated slog, something that felt like it was trying to, do justice to a work of writing that mattered a lot at the time, but feels very dated with modern day digital effects, modern day storytelling, things that don't let you suspend your disbelief. Like, I was not in the Lighthouse mode while I was watching this. I was in a modern monster flick. And then what I got was this kind of grand, gothic, romantic, cheesy, for lack of a better word, movie. And I don't know what to make of this at all. Like, Jacob Elordi is good as the monster in the sense that he has to convey emotion and you believe he has emotion. But the movie, I think, was just like very, sometimes intentionally, but mostly unintentionally funny and awkward and just strange and kind of lifeless. So I don't know. What did you think of this?
So a lot of Guillermo's work is stuff you have to calibrate to, right? Mm-hmm. It's like it's asking you to meet it halfway, and if you do that, I think that there can potentially be a lot there for you. I definitely was warmer on this film than you. I think the presentation of, like, starting where it does with what I think is pretty awesome, like, monster creature feature sort of experience of Frankenstein's monster first encountering like a seafaring vessel and interacting with a bunch of people. Like, all of that was fucking rad.
Sure.
Like, that shit was rad as hell, and that kind of set me in the mindset of it. Then this film like backtracks and goes like, okay, we're gonna do all that back history stuff, and the way it most of the versions of Frankenstein that I consume is like, whether it's spoofy type stuff or like genuine attempts at it or stage versions of it, it's like, take a dead thing, hit it with some lightning, make a thing. The fact that this film actually plays in the space of like theoretically how this could work, whatever to the science of it, but like the idea of actually playing with it, and it's not just a person that's stitched up, it's like literally an explanation for all the individual pieces and choosing the right pieces to put this monster together. I enjoyed sort of that sandbox that we were playing and of piecing together this being and all the work that went into actually powering him, and the idea of what do you build from a creature, or what can you get out of a creature that you've built? How do you turn it into a real thing out there, and what are its motivations? So I sort of did the meeting of Guillermo halfway. Mm-hmm. I don't think this is a perfect film. I didn't hate that middle section of him learning to be human,
It didn't feel to you like a hour-long version of some SNL skit about Frankenstein's monster going to college?
No. I mean, I had already sort of bought into this world, right? So it was kind of like, for me, it is a simple thing, but like his interaction with the old man and like learning stuff like that didn't bother. It's this Guillermo's work is always fairy tale, right?
Of course, yeah.
And I am willing to watch fairy tale things as a fairy tale and kind of enter it with a semi-childlike mind and kind of just go with that. And for me, I didn't walk out of it going like, holy shit, Frankenstein was rad. I went out of it going like, yeah, that was kind of cool. There was enough really interesting stuff and enough interesting set pieces and like beautiful, as you said, like gothic things, imagery and stuff like that, that I was coming along for this journey. I didn't need a companion, so
you have a companion.
But yeah, for me, it is a fine film. I enjoyed it enough, but yeah, for me, it wasn't a thing that like blew me away. It was just a thing that I was kind of like, I like the idea of what is happening now, and there is enough there to propel me along to go like, oh, I like that it did something like this. Okay, I like this thing. It was like an exercise in seeing why Guillermo wanted to make this,
right,
and being like, yeah, you did what you wanted to do, and I see that you did it, and you executed on it in a way that is genuinely you, and I'm happy for you, and I had fun.
I'm glad that you liked it. For me, it isn't the fairy tale elements. I'm happy with simple storytelling, with putting myself in a childlike place. There's so much obvious underlying stuff here that just feels goofy for me. Like, there's a moment when a character literally shouts at Dr. Frankenstein that he is the real monster, right? Like, this is asking you to receive it as a fairy tale, but it is talking about itself in a self-important way that just doesn't match with that, like, wondrous sense of storytelling for me. So I was just bored out of my fucking mind.
Oh, Steven, I could hear your exasperated breath. All right. Should we go on to the next one?
Yep.
Okay, so the next film is Ballad of a Small Player, and that is the latest film from Edward Berger, who did Conclave. And this is sort of a film about a man who likes to gamble, who wakes up in a hotel, is being chased by people who he owes money, and is, just gotta win one really big hand, and he can pay off all his debts. How do I talk about this film? Basically, this is a film. I think there's going to be a pattern in things that we watched on this particular day of the festival. I was not super big on this film, but I like this film on paper. Mm-hmm. I like the idea of what it's doing. I like this sort of tale that it's weaving, this sort of idea of a person doomed to repeat this thing until they can solve a problem. It's like a person who is in a self-imposed Groundhog's Day, right? In a sense. And it's like, so much of this film theoretically works for me, and I'm a fan of Colin Farrell. Like, I find him infinitely watchable in things that I don't even like the thing that he's in, but I like watching him in. Tilda Swinton has a fun mini part in this film that is kind of quirky, like most of Tilda Swinton's stuff. So there was enough here to kind of propel me forward. I never rose to a height of really being like, this is executing on everything that would make me genuinely enjoy this. But I was like, oh, again, I kind of like this fairy tale sort of story on paper. But I found it tiring. But even while my brain was going, I like what you're doing, I just don't like how you're doing it. And that's kind of how I felt about this film. But what about you? Did you like this more than Frankenstein?
I did like it more than Frankenstein, but not to the degree of liking this movie. I think this movie is fine. I think this movie, it has enough elements to make me think it was worth making. I just think it was made in a very odd way. Like, this movie has a ton of style. It has a ton of shots or visions that clearly Edward Berger wanted to put on screen, and he did a good job with that. But stitching it together into something that feels like a coherent narrative, where things flow, where you feel the rise and fall of the character, where you are along for the journey in a satisfying way, I don't think he accomplished that at all. Yeah. I feel like, for me, from the moment I saw what story this was going to be, I knew roughly what was going to happen, right? Yeah. Including some spoilery twists or whatever. But I mean more broadly, what is the arc that Colin Farrell's character is going to take? And when I'm on that journey, I expect to kind of feel myself low when he is low, to feel myself getting high when he's getting high, to feel maybe the emptiness of success and all of that. And I didn't. I just felt like there were a bunch of disconnected scenes that thought they were more clever than they are. And I don't really know what separates this from a Inherent Vice or other kind of movie that is really about disconnected scenes that show the outlandishness of someone's life or the world that they're living in, except the comedy just felt a little off here. It didn't flow to me in a very seamless way. The only thing I wrote down after watching this was Nothing Burger. It just it's not a lot of there. Yeah. And I think there's a moment, this doesn't even count as a spoiler because who cares really. There's a moment of dancing in the credits, and to me that kind of speaks to what this movie is, which is just, it's throwing shit at the fan and being like, I hope this makes you happy, even though I did nothing to like make you want this to happen in the course of the movie.
The funniest thing about that is the way that's set up and the way it's shot. It's so much time and effort went into shooting that for absolutely nothing related to the story.
Yeah, it's shot in a way that makes you think like we've been rooting for this running gag for a long time, and finally we get to see it, and we're not. It's just like a random thing that he wanted to do on the side. So I don't know. I found it a little bit bewildering, but like again, it looks good. I love Colin Farrell. You know, Tilda Swinton. I obviously think she's an amazing actress, but I'm starting to realize there are versions of her like quirky side character in movies that do not guarantee I'm going to go for it. Yeah. And here I feel like the quirkiness that she was inhabiting was kind of the version of the comedy that didn't really work for me in the movie. But whatever it is, it's an interesting exercise. I don't think there's a whole lot of there. Speaking of things that maybe don't have a whole lot of there. Every festival, I try to pick a few movies that are off the beaten path, like ones that are not going to show up in anyone's list of like most anticipated, that probably won't get Oscars attention, that might not even ever really come out with a major distributor, but just like, hey, I'm at a festival, I want to see a heartfelt thing, maybe it'll make me cry, maybe it'll be cute. And this year, that pick was Eternal Return. This is described as an epic romance, directed by Yaniv Raz. It stars Naomi Scott and Kit Harington. And the basic premise of this is, what if there was a map that could bring you back in time? What if there was a map where the people that you miss, the people that you love, the time that you wish you could go back to, you could go there and you could relive those life events? That's at least what the synopsis claimed that this would be about when I booked this. You had been razzing me a bit leading up to it, saying that this movie is going to be really cheesy. There's a big chance this movie is going to be rough. And I was so sure I was going to be watching a stripped down romantic film, and within seconds, as will be a trend with a handful of movies here, the narration started and I was like, oh boy. I did not know this was the kind of movie I was going to be watching. This movie, if I stumbled across this on Netflix because it had been released by like some major studio around Christmas or whatever, I would think, okay, that's cute. It's not for me, but whatever, it's cute. I'm pretty puzzled by this movie, its inclusion in the festival, by the stuff that the director was saying leading up to the movie being shown.
Stephen, it's a special presentation.
Yeah, exactly. It is a very special presentation. This is just very, very, very corny, cheesy, romanticized storytelling that also takes some zigs and zags that kind of takes away its own premise while you're watching it. It doesn't really give you the thing that it told you it was going to give you, and I'm not really sure what it gave me instead. The nicest thing I can say about this is I think Naomi Scott is charming as hell. Like she does a great job here. I think she could basically make any Hallmark movie be watchable, right? Like she clearly has the chops for that.
Yeah, one of my bullets says that basically she has natural chemistry with anything you put in front of her. So.
Exactly. Yeah, and that counts for something, right? Like that definitely helps this movie. It's also fun to see Kit Harington do this kind of goofy, charmingly befuddled type role that I don't think...
weird Harry Potter character.
Exactly. This thing I don't think I've ever seen from him before. But otherwise, I don't know, everything about this movie, like it had a handful of laughs from like clever bits of dialogue that felt like they belonged in a better, more realistic movie. But then there's subplots. There's this character of Malcolm who is like ripped directly out of other movies where we're supposed to really love him and be attached to him. But here it just like, it felt like it came out of nowhere and was playing on my heartstrings without earning any of it. There's like this idea of a romance and falling in love and mystery and wonder in the world, and it just really didn't work on me at all. Again, like I felt warmth enough to Naomi Scott that it made me be like, I'm not gonna hate on this movie. I'm fine that I watched it. At least I learned how good an actress she can be regardless of the source material. But yeah, I was wrong. This was a real rough sit. How did you feel?
Well, Stephen, it wasn't a rough sit for me. This is probably fall into like one of those guilty pleasure sort of categories for me. We've talked about this podcast before. I don't hate storybook narration. Now, key here has to be storybook narration,
Right, I see.
not just pure narration.
Like perhaps Russian oligarchs of sorts you might feel differently about.
Yeah, I would definitely feel differently about that sort of thing. But just this playful storybook narration that you get from the beginning of this, I was like, oh, this is what we're watching. It will be overly sentimental, but it also has this air of fantasticalness that is slightly childlike in its nature, right? Yeah. Obviously, it's adults with romantic stuff intentions, but it's played as the storybook fairy tale. Again, a thing like Frankenstein. This is a fairy tale. I like Naomi Scott. I can't, like, as soon as it started, I was like, oh, yep, okay, cool, I'm in for whatever the hell I'm about to watch. I also like Kit Harington's weird, as I said, Harry Potter character that he was playing. It has a bunch of things that I can watch. This would be the type of film where that if there's a trailer, I would probably text you. We don't have to review this, but I'm definitely watching this weekend. And then I'd watch it, and we would never talk about it again. But I would secretly kind of like it a little bit.
Right. And now you get to admit to it on mic.
Yeah. But I think that I really like what this film is trying to do. Let's throw out the director's introduction to the film and what he was saying about his backstory that caused this.
Yeah, I don't really care about that either.
Yeah. That kind of gave me an eyebrow before the movie started. But I think for me, it's fun enough, and it's sweet enough, and it's tender enough, or whatever. It's super manipulative, but I was kind of enjoying what it was doing. My only real big complaint about this film is that, without getting too spoilery, there's kind of two ways you can interpret what Kit Harington's character believes about the reality. No matter which one you choose, this movie is super fucked up.
Yeah.
And the way it rewards the fucked upness of it is baffling to me. Like, I enjoyed this film enough to secretly like it, and then as soon as it was over, I was like, man, I wish somebody would watch this so I could talk to them about how fucked this this story actually is, if you really think about it. But all that being said, the journey, the friends we make along the way, I enjoyed. Again, in a guilty pleasure. This is not a good movie, but as a guilty pleasure.
We clearly just woke up on different sides of the bed yesterday.
Yeah, for sure. All right, so moving on, let's talk about another film that's kind of fantastical. It's a little film called The Last Viking, and this is the latest film from Anders Thomas Jensen. And but yeah, if you've watched any Anders Thomas Jensen film, this is another one of those. If you've liked those films in the past, you're probably going to enjoy this. If you didn't like those, if those did not work for you, this one may get you close to it, but I think you still may have a problem with that style of humor. I thought this was fun enough. Basically, it was. To me, my biggest problem with this film is that it's kind of two films stuck together. There is the film about what happens after somebody finishes a job and is trying to find the money from their thing. And then there is this on its own brilliant premise about what if you had a bunch of psychiatric patients, each of which thought they were a member of the Beatles, and you were trying to start a band with them. Yeah. I want a whole film from this guy of just that band trying to form and start and perform places. This film is a very specific type of humor. I found it funny, not laugh out loud funny, but kind of chuckle in my head funny. And the people in our theater seem to love it, even though we were in a tiny theater. This is a fun film that is a very specific type of humor that if it works for you, it'll work for you. If it doesn't, it won't. I don't know how much I'm going to think about this film later, but I had a fun time watching it at 10 o'clock last night.
Yeah, I mean, this was my favorite film of that day, that run of movies that otherwise mostly didn't work for me. I enjoyed Riders of Justice quite a bit, so I had a hunch that I knew what to expect here, but I think this is an example of one of those movies that you were pointing to, that it did a little more than that. Like, it won me over even more than the normal brand that this guy plays in. I think there is some interesting shit going on in this movie alongside its primary aim, which is to be a just very darkly funny movie with an extremely wacky premise. It's saying something, I don't know exactly what, exploring like identity, our ability to choose our own identity, how much should we accommodate each other's emotional wounds versus try to fix them or talk them out of it. You know, how are we meant to live in a world where we are all hurting and broken, and should we give each other tough love, or should we just accept that we're fucked up and kind of go along for the delusion? I thought this was a mostly very, very funny movie. That's what got me. There are scenes of physical comedy that Mads Mikkelsen does that had me just laughing with shock and delight, in a way that's hard to pull off, you know, especially because, again, I saw Riders of Justice. Like, I know there could be violence or things like that in this movie. That doesn't inherently make me just have like a surprised yelp of laughter. But this movie just really goes into strange, interesting places. I don't think it 100% hangs together. You know, I have a Danish friend who asked me what I thought of this, and I said that I liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. Like, it was bleakly funny, but it was like very good natured. It had some heart to it. It has some level of a daring willingness to talk about really difficult subjects and juxtapose them with laughter, or even make you laugh at the difficult subject. Like, there are scenes of violence being inflicted on people in this movie who we are not used to laughing anywhere adjacent to those things happen. And here there are times when we laugh directly at them. And that is a tightrope that Anders Thomas Jensen just walks really well. I think Nicolaj and Mads are both just like really game for this wacky balls to the wall story. And there was some communal aspect of sitting in our small theater watching it directly in front of the director and his wife and some collaborators that just it warmed me to it. I don't know. I would recommend this movie. I think if you've seen any of his other movies and liked it, I think you're going to like this one. And you also can't possibly predict what it's going to do, because even I don't know if I remember everything it did.
Yeah. I do want to know, Stephen, do you think the commentary you were referring to actually exists in the film, or is it just by chance it's hitting it?
I think it's in the soup of the film. I think there are too many references to these kinds of things, from Mads's insistence on being called John, to characters talking about the world changing, to the fable that people are introduced to. I think there's enough there that is something that the director is wrestling with. I don't know if he has a thing to say about it other than just like, this is on my mind, what do I do with it? But I do feel like it's there, and if I were more brave, I would have asked him about that in the Q&A. I also, for listeners, just briefly want to let them know that there was an old man laughing behind us. I want to believe he was Danish for some reason. It just, the laugh sounded like, you know, bracket laughs in Scandinavian. And every time a funny thing happened, he would just go like, oh, in a way that I found very delightful. I tried to lean back, so hopefully that didn't clip the microphone. Anyway, imagine that happening roughly like 40 times in a comedy, and you can picture our experience. Moving on to a very different film. The next morning, we watched Orphan. This is a historical drama directed by Laszlo Nemes. He's a guy that I really love from the film Son of Saul, which I got it must have been like a decade ago, but I believe it made my top 10 list that year. Son of Saul was this really, really intense drama about the Holocaust that didn't use language and mostly used visuals. I described it at the time as like a Birdman from hell. It's like clinging to the back of this person's head through just the horrors of a concentration camp and saying like, I am going to recreate the nightmare that this person was living through and just make you sit with it. And it blew me away. This time around, the director is recreating a period of time in Hungary after the Hungarian uprising. And particularly, he's doing it by showing the story of a boy. The movie is called Orphan, but, you know, he has a mother, at least that we've met in this movie. As he's a Jewish kid living in Hungary. He's very poor. He's frustrated because his dad isn't around. He's trying to figure out who he is. He has a lot of rage that he wants to figure out how to handle. And it's kind of just a coming of age story of what does it mean to grow up in this environment. This was very, very different from Son of Saul. It is definitely not as visceral. I respect the hell out of it because I think the period recreation feels very like immersive. I fully believed I was transposed to this like time and place that I've never been before. This movie has a lot of darkness. It has a lot of things it's wrestling with. I don't know that all of it translated for me, partly because I am not this person with his specific family history. Like, I don't know how much it would translate for even a Hungarian audience, but especially lacking the history, I also just couldn't quite piece together everything that the movie was grappling with. Like, I found it moving. I thought it was beautiful to look at. There are, as it becomes later, a more like intense interpersonal drama with one very clear thing that the kid is wrestling with. I thought this movie became much more successful, much more easy for me to hold on to. But for most of the runtime, I kind of just had to let it wash over me and just enjoy the visuals and the feeling of being in this new time and place. So I still totally don't know where to land. I think this is a well-made movie that I am ill-equipped to totally judge, except to say that, like, it's a all-encompassing vision, and like I think you do live in his world for a while. I just am not totally sure where it all added up to. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel similar to how you feel about, you know, I buy into this space and I buy into the authenticity of it, and I was coming along with the ride of being immersed in this little child as he walks through this place that has obviously changed in the time that he's been there, and him trying to struggle with his identity and what he knows about his past, and you know, the group of people that he belongs to. All of that was there and interesting, but for me, it was always at a distance. Like, I was watching far away this child who doesn't have enough information himself, reacting to things that I don't have enough information myself for. So it's like I'm watching a thing that I believe means a lot to somebody, but I don't have the background to fully understand the progression. Like, if there is a specific thing that everybody likes to talk to water cooler or water boilers,
right?
You know what I mean? You know, like, there's stuff in it that I'm just kind of like, oh, there's a lot of interesting stuff here, whether it be visual or just kind of like these emotional scenes. But ultimately, for me, it's not a complete thought that I can absorb myself. It's mostly a thing that I am just sitting and, as you said, letting it wash over me and going like, I feel that you feel this.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily feel it myself.
Yeah, I would say that it's kind of one of those subtle storytelling techniques, like small things like these, where they decide to go a long time without telling you literally what it is about because the director assumes you will pick it up. And I imagine I could have if I were less dumb or if I knew more about the time and place. But for me, I would have needed that context spoon-fed to me earlier if I was supposed to go along for the journey. Like, instead, I absorbed it passively and enjoyed that it was beautiful, but it didn't build to anything because it took so long to tell me literally what it was about. And then I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing.
Cool. All right. So let's move on to another thing that may or may not have washed over people. So the next film, The Wizard of the Kremlin, is essentially a story of the rise of an individual that helped bring Putin to power. It's sort of the wizard, the wizard behind the curtain that helped make Putin who he is, I guess. This is a film that I was, you know, based on the cast alone, was kind of stoked, or at least curious about, right? And I think from the start of the film, I got quite worried, and that worry never turned into excitement or anything. This is a film that is essentially a pretty straightforward telling of events in a way that is very, very clinical, being spoken. It's like a person being interviewed, telling their own history with a, I think I joked to you as we were leaving, that it's sort of like those stories that you put on to go to sleep where somebody's just talking softly about how things happened and this is how the world goes. It was a person telling his own history in his own words, very clinically, in a way where I don't have any sort of, like, big coups take place. And it's just like, and then I did the coup, and then the coup was done, and then next event that took place was that I did this. And this film never pulled me in and never gripped me. I was never excited. power changes hands in the middle of scenes, and I don't know the motivation of which people helped make that happen. Like, it just, for me, I found this film a very trying experience. That felt like I was sent to Siberia.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I was alluding to this earlier too with the voiceover narration. It begins and it never relents. I think Paul Dano is doing something intentional there, where he is trying to show a character who is just all calculation and has a kind of bewildering lack of remorse, even though he's able to reflect on what he did. It all just becomes the same kind of sing-song monotone, you know? But that is a very difficult thing to sit through. My like brief description of this movie is like The Big Short on Quaaludes. It's like the only way it makes sense for me is that it is trying to hold our hand through a period of change and turmoil that happened in Russia and find a way to dramatize and tell us all of the details about it. And it does that in such a kind of ham-fisted way. Like, the premise of this movie is that Paul Dano's character, Vadim Baranov, is talking to Jeffrey Wright, who is some esteemed journalist who has specifically been doing a deep dive writing all about him. He invites him to his home and then calmly tells him point by point Wikipedia type things that obviously this dude already fucking knows. Yeah. If this dude is an expert. And so,
but the look on Jeffrey Wright's face tells me that he didn't know it.
Yeah.
He was learning about it.
And so right from the jump, I was just like, you know, this is directed by Olivier Assayas, who has made multiple movies that I think are brilliant. And here it's just like, you are really dumbing this down to an audience. And to your point, it doesn't even work because it lacks the like dramatic gravitas to make me feel what it means when power changes hands, when things happen like this in Russia. It tells me all the information without really communicating it. So it's like no one is served by that decision. I don't feel like I know more about the character. I don't feel like I know more about Russia. The only thing I'm grateful for is that I at least got to like experience roughly the timeline of how Putin came to power. And so now that is a thing that is in my brain that didn't used to be in my brain. Like, now I can tuck that away as, okay, I know a few more things than I used to know. But otherwise, I don't know. I found it to be pretty trying. This was very long too. Yeah. And there were moments when I thought, okay, you should be ending right here. And then another title card would come up and there would be just a new chapter and more that it wanted to say. And I don't know.
156 minutes?
Exactly, Jesus Christ. Yeah, because I was doing the math while I was sitting there of, wait a minute, this movie started when? And we don't get out until when? And yeah, this is like one of the longer films we will see at the festival, and I just don't think it earns that at all. Like, if people want to see a deep dive into Russian counterculture and the boom of the 90s, there was a movie, Limonov, The Ballad, that came out at Cannes a few years ago, where Ben Whishaw plays this kind of Russian activist, and I think it is much more stylish and interesting and inventive in how it tries to tell these stories.
Yeah, it really felt, I mean, you already talked about The Big Short on Quaaludes, but it felt like, what if you took Vice, whether or not you like the film Vice, but you took Vice and you just ripped out all the fun and just had it be the facts of it, and that's sort of the problem with the film.
Yeah, 100%. I also just have to note that it took me a while to realize Jude Law was playing Vladimir Putin in this movie. And what's weird is there was another weird historical drama directed by someone else a couple of years ago called Firebrand, where Jude Law plays Henry VIII. And Alicia Vikander plays his love interest there. So I was like, do these people just like... Is there some weird tour that they're doing where they're just like, we are going to do all the weird biopics about mad dictators' rise to power? It's very, very strange. A very weird movie.
Also, Alicia Vikander, I don't understand what her character even is or how it relates to this story. It's basically Paul Dano's like, one time I had the hots for Alicia Vikander, and then let me tell the rest of the stuff that you want to hear. And then she shows up occasionally to say like, I don't know if I agree with what you're doing, bub.
Yeah, it is very... I think inexplicable and poorly conceived. Yeah, maybe my least favorite of the festival so far. Certainly the most punishing. All right, and we can wrap up with one more movie. This is another one that I think we both kind of wanted to see this movie, but I particularly wanted to see it, and that's The Love That Remains. This is a drama by, I'm not going to pronounce Icelandic names correctly, but Heener Palmason, the guy. If
Nailed
you
it.
saw Godland a couple years ago, that was a beautiful movie that he made, set in, you know, a period piece about Iceland kind of before it was really inhabited, and people who come there, and kind of the punishing feeling of being in nature, and like man versus nature and man's emotions in this empty, barren place. And what I had loved about that movie was just the jaw-dropping cinematography. It just looked beautiful. Like, it was one of those things where every scene was composed in a way that could have been a beautiful painting. The Love That Remains is telling a very, very, very different story than that one did. This is a drama of sorts about a family where the husband has recently split from the wife. We never really learn exactly why, but they have 3 kids, and he's trying to be in their life. And it's kind of about the awkward feeling of being like an appendage in a family that you no longer belong to anymore, right? Like, what do you, to very obviously interpret the title, what do you do with the love that remains? Like this rusty thing that got peeled off of this family. Like, what do I do with this thing that's left? How do I use this, right? This movie is not very directly about any of those things. I thought this would be a movie that makes me cry, a movie that would be just a deep, intense, like The Salt Path, but walking around, you know, Iceland instead of walking around the UK. And instead, it is all kind of impressionistic, living on the metaphor level. And it still worked on me pretty well. Like, I actually think I still quite like this movie. I also don't know how to describe what it is trying to do or why it works. Like, it's a movie that's just like juxtaposing a lot of things. On one hand, there's a very relatable just snapshots of a family, you know, 3 very believable naturalistic kids who are the actual kids of the director. The kind of awkward, strained relationship between the father and the mother, you know, his wife, and kind of how do they engage with each other. That I all found heartwarming and lovely, like whenever I was seeing them be a family. Then there would also be scenes that are living more at like the metaphorical level, right? Being stranded out at sea. This artwork that, again, comes from letting the elements erode this thing and protecting it with a piece of metal, and then peeling away the metal and seeing rust and the patterns that it makes. And, you know, there are like clear analogies there to like clinging to someone and then being forcibly removed, and how it looks and feels afterwards, and what do you do, how do you make art out of it.
Wait, the love that remains is rust?
I think so, yeah. Metaphorically speaking. There's stuff there that there's a lot of images that I just thought were beautifully composed. You know, I want to go to this remote part of Iceland. I want to live in this world.
Yeah,
there are also fantastical flights of fancy that feel like he overplayed his hand. You know, he overstepped. He tried to live in the metaphorical realm and wound up making something goofy and not necessarily fitting with the like sardonic tone of the rest of the movie. But ultimately, I thought it was beautiful and puzzling, and I was captivated, which is a surprising thing to say about the last movie in a very, very long, sleep-deprived day, especially one that has so little plot. But yeah, like The Last Viking, this had a kind of dark, bleak sense of humor around the periphery that I enjoyed, and it just had like a lot of beauty to it that made me... I'm glad that I saw this. I don't know what other context I would choose to watch it, but I do think it is worth checking out just to like experience this particular brand of meditative, melancholy comedy. How did you feel? Did it lose you entirely, or were you on board for the photography?
It never lost me entirely. This is, but it's just it disappointed me in that I thought this could potentially be one of my more favorite things from the festival going into it. Like, as you said, I wanted this to be Salt Path. But I realized from the very, very start that I had wildly misjudged what this film was going to be, and that is 100% on me. But I think for me, this is a film where the thesis of the film is the title of the film. There is a bunch of metaphor there, but the overall premise is not deeper than that. I vibe with the relationship between the family, what's going on. Like, everything in the film works for me individually, right? Like, I like what it's doing. There's moments of genuine humor that had me vibing with this film. I just think that there's nothing lingering for me. You know, my half-hearted response to the end is the feeling that remains. None. I don't think this thing is going to linger with me at all. But in the moment, I was enjoying what it was doing, and I like the vibe of it. But it feels like there is, you know, in the sort of Q&A that was happening afterwards with not the director, but one of the actors answering for the director, and because people in the audience didn't understand that, apparently. This is a person who wants to make films to get something out, but lives in a remote place where there's limited access to people to help make those films about. So I see that. I see the strings of, I am making a thing that explores ideas I'm curious about with the limited resources I have to do that. And I'm using the maximum value out of the resources that I have, and the value is genuinely good.
Yeah.
But also you're limited in the story that you can tell because you know that you're going to work with your kids and this piece of land that you have access to, and everything has to be self-contained there. And then you're going to work with ideas, but not necessarily have a full story. Films don't have to have full stories. I prefer ones that have full stories and full thoughts in them, or directly say something. This film asks more questions than it does have something specific to say about what remains. So for me, it didn't work perfectly, but it wasn't a film. It was a film that I did enjoy. It just didn't quite have enough to say for it to stick with me, as opposed to just being like, oh yeah, that was cute.
Yeah, I feel you.
Cool. All right. Well, again, time for us to rush out to another set of screenings.
Another set of screaming.
Another set of screenings. We have a big day today. So, Stephen, why don't you let people know where they can find you?
People can find me at Blue Sky at sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or ChristopherIRL and a number of social platforms. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know when the episodes go live, you can follow us at twitter.com/spoilerwarning, facebook.com/thespoilerwarning, or instagram.com/thespoilerwarning. If you want to get a hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will come from a track selected from artlist.io, so hopefully you're enjoying that. As we said, we're rushing off, and we'll see you in another part or a few other parts.
Bye.
Bye.